I just watched the new Matthew Matosis video. Well, it's new at the time of this came out. It's called Aesthetic Deception. And I think that it's a really interesting it exposes a really interesting what do I want to call it? I don't want to be pretentious. The response to it has been interesting. I was reading through the comments, I was reading through other people's discussion of the video, and I noticed two things. So, well, I'll briefly describe what the video is about. Matthew's been working in game design for a little bit, and he is basically writing about a kind of phenomenon or facet of video games as a medium that he just kind of wants to talk about. In this case, he is dubbed the term aesthetic deception, probably because there isn't really a better, more specific term for it. Essentially, I would describe it from watching the video as being kind of like this, the way in which a game forces you to sort of suspend your disbelief for the purposes of something. to some end. The example he introduces it with is a moment in, I think, Uncharted 2, where Nathan Drake is shimmying along what would you call it? Basically a ledge, and it's presented as being very precarious. However, there's no actual way for you to fall off. It's not necessarily an inconsistency, because the story is about Nathan Drake. Part of the story is him shimmying across this dangerous ledge and getting across without falling. And the game itself says, yep, Nathan Drake does not fall here. However, it's presented in the moment as having some kind of danger. It's supposed to make you go, whoa. And when you realize that, you get kind of like, okay. You're like, okay, a certain part of maybe it's effective in the moment if you allow your disbelief to be suspended, but there's a trade-off there, and that's essentially what the video is going over. I don't know if this would fit the exact definition, but it reminds me of this anecdote I remember from someone talking about playing Gears of War for the first time, and realizing that every time they walked into a room that conspicuously had a bunch of waist-high walls, they just kind of got primed for combat. They sort of got put on edge a little bit because they were expecting enemies to crash through at some point, just because of the way that the game communicates information to you. You're kind of seeing through at a certain point you're seeing through the deception. These aren't just walls here that are just there to be, because that's how the world is. They're there for gameplay purposes, and you're kind of interfacing with the game you're bypassing this aesthetic layer. And the whole video is just going through stuff like this, and the effects that can have on a game's what do you call it? I almost said atmosphere. That's also not quite the same word. The effect that it can have on a game, on the player's experience of a game, and also their experience across games. I noticed that there were two responses that really intrigued me. One was that people got really hung up on his description of coyote time, which is basically where in certain platformers you will step off of a platform and there will be a little moment, a brief moment, where you can still jump. And it's basically a little bit of wiggle room for the player to still make a jump and not have to pay very close attention to the pixels of at what point exactly does the character fall off the ledge. Does their collision fall off the ledge, basically. I remember the developers of Doom Eternal talking about this, because that game is much more platforming heavy, and they basically were like, okay, they realized that doing first-person platforming without implementing some kind of coyote time is really a real pain in the ass, especially if it's really fast-paced and you're doing it during combat sections, like in Eternal. People got really hung up on his description of that, and talking about, basically, because he goes into explaining what it is and then saying that if a player understands coyote time, it can and often will affect the way in which they approach all games in the genre of platforming, to at least like figure them out. And later on he uses he makes another comparison, which is hitboxes and hurtboxes in a fighting game. And he's like, that's an even more blatant example I think of, maybe just because I'm more familiar with it. But like, yeah, the hitbox on Jetta's spinning scythe projectile does not necessarily match the sprite. It's actually much smaller than it appears. You run into this in like bullet hells as well. The hitbox is much smaller. There's gameplay things going on under the surface that do not match what the visuals look like. There is some kind of deception happening between the presentation and the mechanics, the actual underlying mechanics, in the same way that you might be having a delusion that something is in front of you, but if you reach out, you can't touch it. And that if you're a fighting game player who is aware of these things, you're going to go into training mode, and even if you don't have a hitbox display available in the game settings, you are just going to figure it out yourself by eyeballing it. Like, and yeah, that's exactly something that I do. Like, you just go in and you figure out, okay, what's the hurt box on this move? Like, is it really disjointed or not? And, sometimes you don't even have to go to, like, a wiki to figure this out. You can just kind of eyeball it if you're familiar enough with the genre. People got really hung up on this. And it ties into the second thing that I noticed with the response to this video, which was people interpreting it as a persuasive essay. And I think that this is a really interesting symptom of the way that a lot of, I guess, the content that is most, how do I put this? The essay content, the video essay content that exists, like, that is most common on YouTube, which is persuasive essays. I learned this back in school. There are different kinds of essays. A persuasive essay is obviously trying to... Jesus Christ. I don't know if the door slamming picked up. Must have been the wind. Trying to convince you of a point. Formulate an argument and convince you of a point that the writer is making. What aesthetic deception is not a persuasive essay. It's an informative or you could say, I guess, an explanatory essay. This might be a more academic term for it. But it made perfect sense to me what he was doing, because I hate to get pretentious on you guys, but I've read a little bit of, like, actually academically rigorous text. So, like, right here in front of me, I have Anti-Oedipus by Guy Deleuze and Felix Guattari. Which is, I guess I would describe it most accurately as a book on metaphysics. Essentially, a lot of the book is Deleuze and Guattari explaining something and then meticulously defining it and putting it through a level of different situations and compare and contrasts and all this kind of thing, so that they have a strong working definition of a philosophical concept. And I will notice sometimes when I explain this to people that I know, because it's a long story, but I've had to explain Deleuze to a lot more people in my life than I think anyone should have to. Which is a little tricky for me because I do not consider myself an expert on it at all. I haven't even finished the book. I'm like a little over halfway through. But I think I understand the basics of the Anti-Oedipus and what they're talking about. And I'll be explaining this to people, and I'll explain, like, a certain concept, like, I don't know, psychic social repression. And they'll be like, but so why is that bad? And I'm like, it's not necessarily. It's just the point of the book, or many parts of the book, is not necessarily to say that something is good or bad, just to explain what it is and how it works. There's even a line where they define, I have to quote because I don't feel like searching through the book right now, but there's a line where they basically, the book kind of builds up into a very, very long outline of what they call schizoanalysis. And one of the descriptors that they give for the purpose of schizoanalysis is not to explain why the universe works a certain way, but rather how it works. And I think that is a goal that can be ascribed to a lot of academically rigorous writing. It is an explanation of what something is, not that it's good or bad. But most essays that people consume on the internet are persuasive and argumentative. And so when Matthew Matosis, which, okay, granted, the term aesthetic deception appears kind of pejorative. We interpret deception as being a negative thing. I don't think he's necessarily using it like that, but the wording is kind of careful because it's not inherently a bad thing. In fact, that near the end of the video, he goes through plenty of examples where it's fine, or people even like it, or it increases someone's enjoyment of a game, or the effectiveness of something. The whole point is that it's precarious. How much you deceive someone and in what ways you deceive someone have an effect on the player's experience. But because most people are used to seeing argumentative video essays, they assume that because the title is a little pejorative, it reads that way to many people, and he goes over examples where this could be negative, that it is arguing against it. And so there's a lot of... So the other... one of the other things is he doesn't say anything in the video. Basically, they're focusing really on they're missing the forest for the trees, expecting him to make some kind of value judgment or argue for or against more or less of this. And that's not the point of the video. It's just to explain how it works. It's to explain what aesthetic deception is and how it works. So I thought that was interesting, and it's a good video. I think that you should watch it. It has some thought-provoking ideas. There are some people who actually do engage with the video on the level that it's meant to, which are, excuse me, for instance, disagreeing with the way that he defines certain things or this or that. And those comments are fine. I'm not like on the Matosis defense squad. I just think that a lot of people are like missing the point of the video. It was a cool video. I really like. I like consuming. I like consuming very thoughtful discussion on things like this for this medium that I like.